Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and dear colleagues. And it's a pleasure to be back in Geneva, where I have used to while away my time for 8 to 9 weeks a year, sitting on the Human Rights Committee, taking country reports, trying to survey whether they were complying with their obligations under the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Those obligations, however, are also inherent in the UN Charter in Articles 55 and 56. So even countries that haven't signed the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights are also still bound to obey the demand that one respect the right to life, the right against torture, the right to humane treatment of all persons. And therefore, I think my presence here today, in a very real sense, is a continuation of that work. Now, if you haven't seen the statement of the High Commissioner for Refugees, you should. This is sort of the Magna Carta in which the UN High Commissioner for Refugees has indeed recognized that these folks are under United Nations legal protection. Camp residents who have submitted requests are accordingly now formally asylum seekers under international law whose claims require adjudication. And international law requires that they must be able to benefit from basic protection of their security and well-being. Lived through so many massacres. In Rwanda, in Srebrenica, to have another one, 3 strikes, we're out. It really is just unacceptable to have forewarning. Whatever one's view of the merits of the people, of the cause, that doesn't matter. You can't have the UN present with forewarning, doing nothing, and have R2P responsibility to protect, survive as a viable concept, an idea that was put forward by Kofi Annan and has been adopted by Ban Ki-moon. So I would put to you that, at least in legal terms as well as moral terms, each person in that camp now is under formal UN legal protection, and there is a right to have a preliminary measure, essentially an injunction against either Maliki himself or some of the gentle persons he may allow in across the border to do dirty work against the camp. Now, on the idea of observers, they have been used in many prior situations. UN MOs, UNMOs, UN military observers. They're not armed. They were used in the Prevlaka Peninsula. They've been used in many situations. They, of course, expose themselves to some vulnerability themselves. That comes with the territory of choosing to discharge this role. But it's not as if the UN has never done this before. Their instructions may be to report and retreat, but they're there to report and to avoid any question of what happened, any suggestion that film is not accurate, and frankly to bear moral witness. Now, from a, if I may, a particularistic U.S. point of view, speaking only for myself, but I have a funny background of part national security, part human rights. We didn't fight the war in Iraq to allow Iran to wield its heavy hand throughout the region. It was not intended to allow Iran to become hold the whip hand over Iraq, over Syria, over Lebanon. That's not a fundamentalist solution to anybody's conflict. It's one that would make a mockery of what we tried to do in Iraq. In terms of where the politics on this lie, I'll just tell you that in the U.S., we have a very contentious capital. People don't socialize together. They don't have parties the way they used to. Republicans don't talk to Democrats. They don't go bowling together. But one thing they agree on is this issue. There is bipartisan support across the aisle on protection of Ashraf. From Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who's a tough cookie from Florida, who's the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, to Sheila Jackson Lee, who's from New York City originally, like I am, and moved to Texas, and the congresswoman from Texas, to Ted Poe, who has openly said that he sees UN appropriations as being importantly linked to the performance of the UN on this issue. So this is a right, left, and center issue. It is not one that has any ideological schism in the U.S. And I think that, too, should be a warning to Maliki that whoever's president next time, he's still going to be in trouble if he allows mistreatment, commissions mistreatment to go forward. But I'm also just concerned for the enterprise itself. Again, with the coining of R2P, responsibility to protect, which was, I think, perhaps the finest product of Kofi Annan's distinguished tenure as Secretary General. So I do think here that the lesson that should be sent respectfully to the High Commissioner for Human Rights and certainly to Mr. Maliki of Iraq is that this is a bright line for the U.S., a bright line for the UN, and one that really ought not to be crossed, both for his sake and for ours. Thank you.